I never imagined that the man I loved would one day become the source of my deepest fear. My name is Laura, and this is the story I never thought I'd share with the world. A story of love, deception, and betrayal so deep, it still haunts my dreams. I was born into wealth. My father built his fortune from nothing, and when he passed away, I inherited more money than I could ever spend. I lived comfortably, but always longed for something money couldn't buy: real love. I had dated before, but most men were more interested in my bank account than my heart. Then I met Thomas. He was charming, intelligent, and seemed genuinely uninterested in my wealth. That's what drew me in. He paid for dinners, insisted on splitting bills, and even turned down gifts I tried to give him. It felt different, refreshing, real. We fell in love quickly. Within months, he moved into my estate. We took spontaneous trips, cooked together, spent hours talking about dreams and life. After a year, he proposed to me in front of a quiet jazz club in New York on a snowy night. I said yes without hesitation. My family was skeptical. My lawyer advised a prenuptial agreement, but Thomas refused. If we need a contract to prove our love, then maybe we don't really have it, he said. I melted. Looking back now, I see that moment for what it truly was: manipulation disguised as romance. I was blind. I wanted to believe so badly that he loved me for me. And so, against better judgment, I married him without a prenup. That was the first of many mistakes. But it wouldn't be the last. What began as a dream soon twisted into a nightmare, and I didn't see it coming until it was almost too late. The wedding was beautiful. We rented a countryside estate in England, invited only close friends and family. Everything was intimate, tasteful, and felt like a scene from a romantic film. Thomas looked into my eyes during our vows with such tenderness that I believed every word he said. That night, under the stars, I felt completely safe in his arms. But that feeling wouldn't last. Just weeks into the marriage, Thomas suggested we open a joint account. It's just practical, he told me. We're married now, it's all ours, right? At first, it seemed harmless. We started with a shared credit card. Then came access to my savings accounts and eventually, even my investment portfolios. It was all so gradual, so well disguised in language of trust and unity, that I barely noticed how much control he was gaining. Then the little things started. Thomas became secretive with his phone. He stayed out late with vague explanations. When I asked about his whereabouts, he'd turn the question back on me or laugh it off. "Don't be paranoid, Laura," he'd say, smiling. But the smile no longer comforted me. One afternoon, while reviewing account statements, I noticed a large transfer, an amount far beyond anything we'd discussed. It was wired to an unknown recipient. When I asked him, he brushed it off: a surprise investment. "You'll love it when I tell you." Something inside me stirred. Doubt. It grew quietly, feeding off the inconsistencies and evasions. That night, I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, questioning everything. I couldn't confront him without proof. So I decided to investigate on my own. I installed a tracker on his car, and when he fell asleep, I carefully browsed through his phone. What I discovered next unraveled the world I thought I knew, and turned my love story into something sinister. Thomas was living a double life. On his phone, I found countless messages with a woman saved only as they weren't just flirty or inappropriate, they were intimate, detailed, full of long-term plans and secret rendezvous. But what sent chills through my spine was a single message that read, "She won't be a problem for much longer. Then everything will be ours." I stared at it for minutes, heart pounding, unsure of how to breathe. Was it metaphor? A joke? Or something far darker? I didn't want to believe it, but instinct told me otherwise. I copied the messages, took screenshots, and emailed them to myself. I wasn't ready to confront him yet. I needed more. I hired a private investigator the next day. He worked quickly, and within days, he had photos. Thomas with a holding hands, sharing wine, kissing in a luxury apartment downtown. That apartment, I later found out, was rented 6 months into our marriage under a fake name. I wasn't just a mistress. She was a partner in something much more calculated. One photo showed Thomas handing her a thick envelope. Her smile was cold, satisfied. I felt like vomiting. I had no idea who I had let into my life. I kept playing the role of the clueless wife, but my every move from then on was deliberate. I began to record phone calls, save emails, and document every strange encounter. Then came the night that confirmed my worst fear. Thomas cooked dinner. My favorite dish, mushroom risotto. He poured the wine, lit candles, made the perfect atmosphere. But I couldn't eat. I excused myself, dumped the wine into a nearby plant, and flushed the food down the toilet. I kept a sample though. Something told me I needed to. When I got the lab results back 3 days later, my hands trembled. The results confirmed what I feared most. Traces of a sedative compound and a slow-acting toxin were found in the risotto sample. The dosage wasn't lethal on its own, but administered repeatedly over time, it could easily mimic natural causes. My stomach twisted. This manly husband was trying to kill me. And he was doing it slowly, carefully, methodically. I didn't confront him. Not yet. I needed to survive long enough to bring him down legally. Every day became a calculated performance. I smiled at him. I kissed him goodnight. I told him I loved him. But inside, I was burning with rage, fear, and disgust. I began sleeping with my bedroom door locked. I kept pepper spray in my robe pocket. I told a close friend everything and made her promise that if anything happened to me, she'd hand over the evidence it gathered. One evening, I overheard him on the phone. I pressed my ear to the door and heard him whisper, "It's almost done. She suspects nothing. Just a few more weeks." I froze. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was a murder plan. And I was the target. The next morning, I went to my lawyer. I showed him the texts, the bank transfers, the lab report. He was stunned but acted quickly. He advised immediate asset protection, full legal separation, and suggested contacting the police. But I wanted more than safety. I wanted justice. I worked with the investigator and the authorities to plan an exit that would catch Thomas red-handed. I told Thomas I was going to visit my sister for the weekend. I packed a small bag and took only what I needed. I kissed him goodbye, pretending nothing was wrong. But I never came back. That night, police intercepted Thomas leaving our home. In his car, they found a folder with my passwords, banking info, and a typed letter addressed to A outlining the next steps after my sudden passing. He was arrested on the spot. The story made headlines. Heiress escapes murder plot by husband, they read. My name was everywhere. Old photos of us on vacations, attending galas, smiling for the cameras were plastered across news sites. People speculated, judged, and dissected every part of our lives. Some said I should have known. Others claimed I was naive. But no one truly knew what it was like to sleep beside someone plotting your death. Thomas denied everything at first. Claimed it was a setup. That the evidence was circumstantial. But the mountain of proof, messages, recordings, toxicology reports was overwhelming. The police linked A to two similar cases overseas. She had vanished without a trace, but Thomas wasn't so lucky. He was charged with attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy. I testified against him. It was the hardest day of my life. Standing in court, looking into the eyes of the man I once loved, and telling strangers how he tried to end me. My voice trembled, my hands shook. But I didn't break. He was convicted. 20 years. No parole. The judge called it one of the most chilling cases of domestic betrayal. But the sentence didn't bring peace. Not really. I moved cities, changed my name, got therapy, built my life from scratch. And yet, at night, I still lock every door and double-check every window. The scars are deep. I tell this story not to seek sympathy, but as a warning. Love can blind us. Trust can be weaponized. And sometimes, the most dangerous people are the ones who smile the brightest. My story isn't unique. There are others out there, men and women being deceived, manipulated, poisoned slowly by those they love. If you feel something's wrong, trust that feeling. It might save your life. After the trial, people kept asking me why I didn't see the signs earlier. They'd say, how could someone so smart, so successful, be fooled like that? But what they don't understand is that manipulation doesn't come with a warning label. It starts with small things: little gaslighting, gentle redirections, and occasional guilt trip. Thomas didn't show up one day with a sign that said I'm a killer. He showed up with flowers, compliments, and a disarming laugh. He built trust carefully, layer by layer, until I no longer questioned his inconsistencies. And once he had my love, he used it against me. That's what makes financial abuse so dangerous. It's invisible, quiet, and often wrapped in the language of love. I've spent months trying to understand what made Thomas who he is. Was he always like this? Did something break inside him long ago? Or was I just another target on a list? The truth is, I may never know. But I've come to accept that evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it wears a wedding ring. I often wonder what would have happened if I hadn't trusted my instincts. If I had eaten the dinner. If I had gone to sleep that night without suspicion. Would I have woken up? Or would I have become a headline, young heiress found dead in her home? That thought haunts me. It fuels my mission to share this story. Not for fame or drama, but because someone out there might be living what I lived. Maybe not with poison, but with manipulation, financial control, or emotional warfare. If my voice can make even one person question what doesn't feel right, then it's worth every painful word. I'm not a victim. I'm a survivor, and I refuse to let shame silence me. This story is mine and I'm reclaiming it, one confession at a time. The weeks after his arrest were chaotic. I was constantly contacted by reporters, documentarians, even producers wanting to dramatize my life. I said no to all of them. I didn't want a movie. I wanted peace. The hardest part wasn't the mediate, was looking at myself in the mirror and seeing someone I no longer recognized. I was thinner, quieter, more cautious. I flinched at unexpected noses. I jumped when my phone rang. Trauma changes you. It rearranges your wiring. Every door in my new apartment had extra locks. Every night before bed, I checked under furniture. My therapist called it hypervigilance. I called it survival. And in the middle of that anxiety, I tried to rebuild. I opened a new bank account, disconnected from everything tied to Thomas. I sold the house we once shared. I deleted every photo. I even got a dog, not for company, but because I wanted something that would bark if danger ever returned. But it wasn't just about physical safety. I had to rebuild emotionally. I had to learn to trust again not just people, but myself. For so long, I doubted every gut instinct, every red flag. Thomas had made me feel crazy, overreactive, sensitive. Now I understand that was part of the design. Abusers don't just take your money or your safety, they take your clarity. I joined a support group for survivors of financial abuse. Hearing their stories was like reading chapters from my own book. Different faces, same patterns. It made me feel less alone. Slowly, I began to feel human again. Still broken in places but healing. Still guarded but awake. I stopped asking, why me? And started asking, what now? That shift changed everything. One day, while organizing old files, I came across a journal I'd kept during the early months of our marriage. I had forgotten about it. The pages were filled with hearts, little notes about how much I adored Thomas, poems I'd written about our future. Reading it was like looking into the eyes of a stranger, someone naive, hopeful, blinded by fantasy. I didn't recognize that woman, but I didn't hate her. I pitied her. She was doing her best with the information she had. She believed in love. She believed in him. I kept that journal as a reminder not of weakness, but of growth. We all start somewhere. I also began to document everything I'd learned through this ordeal. The red flags, the behavioral patterns, the psychological tactics. I created a private blog, anonymous at first. I posted stories from other survivors, advice from experts, even warning signs of financial manipulation. To my surprise, it gained traction. Women from all over the world began messaging Mesm, just thanking me, others sharing stories eerily similar to mine. There was a woman in Sweden whose husband slowly drained her savings through fake investments. Another in Canada whose fiancé had created 3 separate identities to scam her. The stories were horrifying, but also affirming. I wasn't alone. This wasn't just my story, it was a pattern. And once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. That realization gave me purpose. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was fighting back. Not with rage or revenge, but with knowledge and exposure. That's what predators fear most: being seen, being named, being stalked. I decided to reveal my identity on the blog after 6 months. My hands trembled as I typed my real name. I hesitated before clicking publish, but something inside me whispered that it was time. The response was overwhelming. Messages poured in, not just from survivors, but from psychologists, lawyers, even law enforcement officials thanking me for shining light on a shadowy issue. That blog became more than therapy. It became a mission. I named it the Deception Files. What started as a collection of my darkest experiences became a library of human resilience. Each post told a story, some mine, some from others, each one a warning, a beacon, a confession. I realized then that while Thomas had taken years from me, he hadn't taken my voice. He hadn't silenced my truth. If anything, he had given it fuel. I began speaking at small events, podcasts, webinars, any place where awareness could grow. I kept the focus on education, how to spot the signs, how to protect your assets, how to listen to your intuition when something feels wrong. I always told people, it doesn't matter how rich or smart or independent you are, manipulators don't care. They look for access, not intelligence. And they thrive in silence. Every time I shared my story, I watched someone's face change, the eyes widening, tears forming, nods of recognition. That connection became my healing. My pain had purpose. I still battled nightmares. I still woke up some nights convinced someone was in the room. But those moments were no longer shackles. They were reminders. Reminders of how far I had come and how many still needed to hear the truth before it was too late. Eventually, I was approached by an independent producer who didn't want to exploit my story but elevate it. She had survived something similar, and she saw the Deception Files as more than a blog, it was a movement. We worked together to create a short documentary series. Not flashy, not dramatized, just truth. Real voices, real pain, real strength. It premiered on a small platform, but the response was massive. Within weeks, millions had watched it. Some wrote in saying it had saved their lives. Others said it gave them the courage to leave toxic relationships or confront hidden abuse. That feedback meant more to me than any headline. It meant the suffering had meaning. That what Thomas tried to destroy became something powerful. I was finally free, not just physically, but emotionally. My past no longer defined me. It fueled me. But there's something I want to say to anyone listening. Healing isn't linear. You don't wake up one day and feel whole again. It's a process. Some days you'll feel strong. Other days, you'll cry in the shower for reasons you can't explain. That's okay. Your story matters even when it's messy, especially when it's messy. For a long time, I thought my purpose ended with surviving. But now I see it clearly. My purpose is to protect others with the truth I once needed to hear. If you've been betrayed, manipulated, or made to feel small, know this: you are not alone. And the first step to reclaiming your power is speaking your truth. Loudly, clearly, without apology. I never expected my pain to become a platform. But once I accepted that this wasn't just about me, everything changed. One of the most painful parts of betrayal is isolation, belief that you're stupid, that you let it happen, that somehow you deserved it. That shame keeps people silent, and silence is where manipulators thrive. That's why I never sugarcoat what happened to me. I speak it plainly. I call it what it is: attempted murder, financial fraud, emotional warfare. The world needs more truth and less politeness when it comes to abuse. I've received hundreds of stories through the deception files. Some of them are so dark, I have to take breaks from reading. One woman was poisoned by her fiancé over months and only survived because she fainted in front of a pharmacist. Another man's partner opened a dozen credit cards in his name, burying him in debt while she lived a double life abroad. It's everywhere. Every age, every income level, every country. There's a myth that victims are always weak or foolish. That's a lie. Most are smart, kind, and trusting. That's what abusers prey on. I started working with organizations focused on financial literacy and emotional abuse. I created a checklist of red flags, shared it online, and watched as thousands downloaded it. People messaged me saying they recognized their partner's behavior for the first time. That checklist saved people, and I'm proud of that. Because the goal is not just to survive, but to prevent. If someone had handed me that checklist 5 years ago, maybe I would have hesitated before falling so deeply, so blindly. Maybe I would have asked more questions. Maybe I would have been harder to fool. Or maybe not. But I know now ignorance is not bliss. It's a breeding ground for disaster. There were moments when I wanted to give up the fight. When the weight of public opinion, media intrusion, and personal grief felt too heavy. People romanticize survival like it's a straight line, then healing, then victory. But it's not. It spirals. It's one step forward, 2 steps back. I'd wake up strong and confident one morning, and the next I'd be curled in bed, afraid of my own shadow. But every time I felt like retreating, I remembered the letter Thomas had written to A. It haunted me. His words were cold, calculated, like I was a hurdle to be removed. He wrote about money, inheritance, and how soon she'd have everything. That letter reminded me why I couldn't stay silent. Because even if I was no longer in danger, someone else might be. I also kept thinking about the dinner night he fed me poisoned risotto with a smile. How many times had I sat across from him, laughing, toasting, trusting while he silently plotted my end? The thought still chills me. But I don't share it to scare people, I share it because it's real. Because financial and emotional abuse don't always come with bruises. Sometimes they come with wine and candlelight. I used to believe evil was loud. Now I know it's often quiet. It whispers. It smiles. It says I love you while it tightens the leash. That knowledge became my armor. I started journaling again, at about love or loss, but about power. My own. What I gave away. What I reclaimed. What I protect now. That shift from victim to survivor to advocate wasn't sudden. It was built, day by painful day. But once it began, there was no going back. I remember the first time I laughed again. Like, truly laughed. It wasn't forced or polite. It just spilled out. I was sitting with a friend, someone who had stuck by me when others disappeared. We were watching an old comedy, something ridiculous and loud, and suddenly, I cracked up. Tears rolled down my face, not from sadness, but from joy. That moment was small, but it mattered. It reminded me that healing doesn't erase the past, but it makes room for the future. I started noticing other small wins. Like the first time I walked alone at night and didn't feel the need to glance over my shoulder every few seconds. Or when I stopped rehearsing my responses to imagined threats. That freedom didn't come from therapy alone, it came from truth. The truth I told, the truth I owned, the truth I refused to bury. Thomas took a lot from me: time, trust, safety. But he didn't take my future. I won that back. One evening, I got an email from a woman in South Africa. She had seen the documentary and recognized her own relationship in my story. She said, "I was scared to leave until I saw what could happen to you. Now I'm gone. Thank you." That email broke me in the best way. I cried for her, for me, for everyone walking around carrying invisible scars. That's why I keep telling this story. Not to relive the trauma, but to redeem it. To give it meaning. Because if my story helps someone leave, question, or protect themselves, then none of it was in vain. I believe that now. Fully. And I won't stop speaking until the silence is gone. There's something I've learned about justice. It's rarely clean. Thomas went to prison, yes. But the emotional residue he left behind can't be locked away. I still struggle with sleep. I still flinch when someone gets too close too fast. I still hesitate before trusting anyone new. And yet, I don't consider myself broken. I consider myself aware. Aware of how fragile trust is. Aware of how easy it is to fall for someone who says all the right things. I've learned that predators don't always look like villains. Sometimes they're charming, attentive, patient. Sometimes they'll learn everything about not to love you but to use you. That awareness is painful, but it's also power. I use that power now to protect myself and others. I give talks, I write, I listen. I no longer feel shame in saying, yes, I was deceived. Because that deception was not a reflection of my weakness, it was a reflection of his cruelty. And I survived it. That matters. That deserves to be seen, not hidden. I've met other survivors who still can't speak their truths out loud. They whisper, they blame themselves, they shrink, and I tell them, you didn't cause this, but you can rise from it. Some days I still battle the voice that says, you should've known. But then I remember I did know. Eventually, I trusted my instincts. I acted, I lived, and now I help others do the same. That's what justice looks like for me. Not a courtroom, not a headline, but a life rebuilt, scarred but unshaken, louder than the lies that tried to destroy it. People often ask me if he'll ever love again. It's a complicated question. The idea of love doesn't scare me, but the idea of being blinded by it does. I've built walls, yes, but not to keep people out, only to keep myself safe while I learn to trust again. I believe love is still possible, but now, I approach it with eyes wide open. No more fairy tales. No more romanticizing red flags. I don't want perfection. I want honesty. I want someone who respects my story and doesn't flinch when I talk about the dark parts. I've started dating again slowly, carefully. I ask direct questions. I watch for patterns. And most importantly, I trust myself. The blog continues to grow. The community has become a lifeline for many, including me. We share not just stories but strength. We remind each other that one person's betrayal doesn't define our worth. We are more than what was done to us. And while I wish I never had to learn these lessons the hard way, I know now that my Vosami truth is the most powerful tool I have. The Deception Files isn't just a name, it's a promise that no one has to suffer in silence, a promise that no secret is too dark to bring into the light. If you're reading this, and your gut is whispering that something feels off, listen. Don't wait for proof. Don't wait for pain. You deserve peace. You deserve safety. You deserve love that isn't conditional or transactional. Real love doesn't ask you to shrink. It lets you breathe. And if you haven't found that yet, don't worry, you will. Just promise me you won't settle for anything less. When I look back at everything, the timeline still feels surreal. 1 year I was planning wedding menus and honeymoon destinations. The next, I was sitting across from detectives, detailing the moments that nearly ended my life. Trauma compresses time in strange ways. It blurs days and sharpens seconds. I can recall the smell of that poison risotto more clearly than I can remember what I wore to my engagement party. Some moments just tattoo themselves onto your memory. But here's something else I've learned: survival isn't just about escaping. It's about reclaiming your voice, your autonomy, your future. I reclaimed mine through the Deception Files, and every story shared, every message received, every voice that dared to speak became a brick in the foundation of something unshakable. I remember one particular story sent to me by a woman named Claire. She had been married for 8 years before discovering her husband had slowly emptied her retirement account. He was charming, successful, and always said the right thing. But behind the charm was a web of deceit. Her story mirrored mine in eerie detail. We spoke on the phone for hours, cried, laughed, healed. I never met her in person, but she changed me. She reminded me that this isn't a solo journey. We heal in community, in shared pain, in collective strength. That's the beauty of truth. It connects. It rebuilds what deception tried to tear down. And while I would never wish my experience on anyone, I'm grateful for the clarity it gave me. I see now, with eyes unclouded. And that vision, it brutal, beautiful clarity, is something no one can ever take away from me again. There was a time when I thought healing meant forgetting. That to be truly better, I had to erase the memories, bury the fear, never speak his name again. But now I know healing isn't about forgetting. It's about remembering without breaking. It's about telling the story without trembling. It's about sitting in the ruins and realizing you're still standing. I've learned how to hold both joy and pain in the same hand. I can laugh deeply and still carry the scars. I can trust cautiously and still believe in goodness. I can look in the mirror and see someone who was once prebet who became a warrior. The mass trial ended with a guilty verdict, but the real verdict came from within. I forgave myself for not seeing it sooner, for falling so hard, for loving someone capable of so much harm. That forgiveness was hard, but necessary, because I needed to free myself not just from him, but from the shame. Shame is a thief. It steals your voice, your worth, your peace. I refuse to let it in. Not anymore. I started writing letters to the version of me who existed before Thomas. I told her she was enough, that she wasn't stupid, that she was simply hopeful, and hope isn't a weakness. It's a superpower. The letters turned into a series. I published them anonymously at first, but over time I added my name, because I wanted her to know she survived. She didn't just survive, she built something from the ashes. Something brave, something bold, something honest. That's what this story is about. Not a man who tried to destroy me, but a woman who refused to stay broken. Sometimes people ask if I ever think about Thomas now. The answer is yes. Not every day, not even often, but sometimes, usually in moments of silence, walking home late, hearing a song we once danced to, catching a glimpse of a photo buried deep in a box I haven't yet thrown away. And when I do think of him, it's not with love. It's not even with hate. It's with distance. Like watching a movie you once starred in, but no longer feel a connection to. Is a character in a chapter that ended, but the lessons he left behind, those are etched into every page that followed. I remember how he made me second guess myself, how he used affection as a tool, how he spoke of our future, while quietly planning to erase me from it. That memory keeps me vigilant and paranoid, but aware. It keeps me grounded in relationships, honest with myself, and fiercely protective of my peace. I've learned to set boundaries that are non-negotiable. I listen when something feels wrong. I no longer explain away discomfort. I no longer stay quiet for the sake of keeping things smooth. That version of Med, one who prioritized harmony over truth, is gone. And in her place stands someone who may be scarred, but is no longer silent. I once thought sharing my story would be the hardest part. But the hardest part was believing I was allowed to. That I didn't owe anyone silence. That I could speak even if my voice shook. And now, my voice is steady. My story is mine. And I tell it not for revenge, but for release. For freedom. For light. A few months ago, I received a message that stopped me cold. It was from a man. He said he had watched the documentary and recognized himself not as a victim, but as someone who had, in his words, gone too far with control. He told me my story woke him up, that it made him seek therapy, that it made him apologize to someone he once loved and manipulated. I sat with that message for a long time, because as much as I speak for survivors, I never expected my words to reach perpetrators. And yet they did. That realization was powerful, because if truth can spark healing on both sides, then maybe there's hope after all. Hope that cycles can break, that silence can end, that harm doesn't have to continue. I'm not naive. I know most people like Thomas don't change. I know many manipulators go on to find new victims. But if even one stops, if even one man or woman steps back from the brink because they heard a story like mine, then that's worth something. It doesn't undo the pain, but it gives it meaning. That man later shared that he now volunteers with a domestic violence prevention group. He never told me his full name. I never asked, but I hope he's telling the truth. I choose to believe he is, because that belief that people can change, that truth can transform, is part of what keeps me going. Not just as a survivor, but as a storyteller, because stories don't just describe the world, they shape it. And the more truth we tell, the more light we let in. Sometimes I'm asked if I regret falling in love with Thomas. It's a loaded question. My instinct is to say yes, to wish I had never met him, never shared a bed with him, never let him into my life. But then I think deeper. I think about the woman I've become because of what I survived. I think about the people I've helped, the lives that may have been spared, the silence I've broken. And I realize my story, painful as it is, has power. So no, I don't regret it, not in the way most expect. I regret the harm, yes, the lies, the fear, the betrayal, but I don't regret learning what I'm capable of. I don't regret discovering the depth of my strength. I don't regret finding a voice I didn't know I had. There's something sacred about rising from the wreckage, about saying, you tried to destroy me, but I'm still here. That's not just survival, that's victory. And that victory isn't just mine. It belongs to everyone who's been lied to, used, discarded. It belongs to anyone who's ever looked in the mirror and wondered how they let it happen. You didn't let it happen, you trusted. And trust isn't a flaw. It's a gift, one that should be honored, not exploited. My story began with deception, but it ends in clarity, in purpose, in truth. And if you're still in the middle of your hold on, your ending can be different. Brighter, stronger, louder. You don't have to stay in the dark. The deception files exist because you deserve light. I've thought often about what I'd say to Thomas if I ever saw him again. Would I scream? Would I cry? Would I walk away in silence? The truth is, I don't know. What do you say to someone who tried to erase you while pretending to love you? There are no words big enough to carry that weight. But if I had to choose, I'd say this: you didn't win. You didn't silence me. You didn't destroy me. You taught me who I never want to be. You showed me what love is not. And for that, strangely, I'm thankful. I'm thankful because what you meant for harm became fuel. You thought you were ending something, but you started something instead, a movement, a mission, a voice louder than your lies. And that voice isn't just mine. It's every survivor who now knows they're not alone. Every person who read my words and saw their own pain reflected back at them. Every heart that's been broken and rebuilt. That's your legacy, Thomas. Not wealth, not charm, but the light that rose from your darkness. And in some twisted way, I'm okay with that, because it means none of this was wasted. Not the fear, not the betrayal, not even the silence. I took it all and built something that helps others see clearly. That to me is justice, not revenge, not punishment, but transformation. You tried to write my ending, but I took back the pen, and with every page I turn, every truth I speak, I rewrite the story. My story, and in this version I live. One of the most healing realizations I had was this: I don't have to be the person I was before all this to be whole again. So many survivors chase a return to normal. But what is normal after trauma? It's not the same as before, and that's okay. I no longer measure myself by who I was. I measure myself by who I chose to become after everything fell apart. I've embraced a new version of strength that doesn't need to look perfect. Some days I still struggle. I still double-check locks. I still hesitate before opening emails from unknown senders. But I don't shame myself for that anymore. Those responses are part of my story. My nervous system remembers even when I try to forget. But that memory isn't weakness. It's wisdom. I've come to admire the parts of myself I once resented. The cautious part. The skeptical part. The part that overthinks. Those are the parts that protected me. They saw the truth before I did. And now I listen to them. I honor them. I've also learned that you can grieve someone and be glad they're gone at the same time. I miss the version of Thomas I thought I knew. I mourn the dream. But I don't miss the reality. I don't miss the control, the manipulation, the slow unraveling of my sense of safety. That loss gave me a chance to rebuild from truth instead of illusion. And that rebuild, though messy, is mine. Every brick, every scar, every breath I take now is a breath he didn't get to steal. That's not just survival, that's freedom. The community that formed around the Deception Files has become something bigger than I ever imagined. We're not just telling stories, we're saving lives. I've watched survivors go from anonymous emails filled with shame to confident voices sharing their truth on their own terms. That transformation is magic. It's proof that storytelling isn't just about reflection, it's about revolution. One message I received recently was from a teenager who realized her older sister was in a financially abusive relationship. Because of a post she read, she was able to speak up. The sister got help. They're both in therapy now, healing together. That message broke me in the best way. Because that's why I do this. That's why I keep speaking. Not because I enjoy revisiting the past, but because I know what silence costs. I paid that price once. I won't pay it again. I believe in the power of one story, one voice, one brave moment of truth, because sometimes that's all it takes to spark change. I often remind people in our community, your story doesn't have to be tidy. It doesn't need a happy ending. It just needs to be real. Honesty is the antidote to deception. And in a world full of lies, your truth is sacred. That's what we're building together. A sacred space, a safe space, a loud space, a space where no one is too broken to be heard. And as long as I have breath, I'll keep making that space louder, because we've been quiet long enough. And now, it's time the world listened. As I come to the end of this story, I realize it's not really an ending at all. It's a beginning born from pain, yes, but also from purpose. I don't tell my story because I'm stuck in it. I tell it because I've moved through it. I've walked the fire, I've sat in the ash, and now I bloom from it. The Deception Files isn't just a channel or a blog, it's a legacy. A living reminder that truth, no matter how buried, always finds a way to rise. If you're watching this and you're in a place of fear or doubt or shame, I want you to hear me clearly. You are not alone. You are not weak. You are not crazy. You are human. And your story matters. Even if no one else believes you. Even if you're still figuring out the words. Even if you're afraid. Speak anyway. Write it down. Whisper it into your pillow. Scream it into the wind. But don't carry it alone. There is power in release. In naming the pain. In turning secrets into sentences. That's how we take our power back. Not all at once. But word by word. Step by step. Breath by breath. I used to think survival was quiet. Now I know it roars. And the louder we get, the harder it becomes for deception to hide. So let this be your permission. To feel. To grieve. To rise. You are allowed to take up space. And you are worthy of a life built on truth. Thank you for listening. Truly, thank you for holding this story with care. It's not easy to sit with someone else's pain, especially when it mirrors your own. But the fact that you're here watching, reading, feeling means more than you know. It means you care, and care is where change begins. If this story resonated with you, I ask you to do one thing: share it. Not for numbers or clicks, but because someone out there needs to hear it. Someone you love might be living a silent nightmare. Someone might be doubting their instincts. Someone might be brushing off red flags because love taught them to ignore warning signs. This video, this story might be the nudge they need to wake up, to walk away, to protect themselves. That's how we break cycles together. One voice becomes two. Two becomes a chorus. And a chorus can shake the walls of even the darkest secrets. I survived something that was meant to kill me. And now, I use that survival to build bridges, to shine light, to whisper to others, you are not alone. If you haven't already, subscribe to the Deception Files. This isn't just a channel, it's a movement. A place where truth lives, where silence breaks, where survivors rise. Thank you for being part of it. Thank you for believing in the power of story. And thank you, from the bottom of my heart, for giving mine a home.